Good evening, friends. I'm so glad you've joined me tonight for another slow and gentle journey through history. Before we begin, take a moment to dim your lights. Let the world outside your window fade into quiet shadows. Nestle into the soft embrace of your blanket and notice how the weight of it settles across your body like a reassuring hand. Let your breath grow calm and steady, in and out, in and out. And as we wander back into the painted halls of the Mughal Empire, I invite you to set aside the noise of the day. You are safe here, in this calm story. If this journey into the past helps you drift peacefully, tap like and subscribe, only if it feels right, and only when you awaken refreshed. For now, simply rest. Let me tell you a story. The morning begins not with alarm clocks or cell phone chimes, but with the faintest silver light spilling across the surface of the Yamuna River. Imagine yourself there, listening to the hushed lapping of the water against its banks. A soft mist curls upward, as though the river itself is stretching from slumber. In the distance, the faint call of a muezzin unfurls across the rooftops, a sound so gentle that it seems to dissolve into the morning air. I rise slowly, as any calligrapher of the Mughal court might, shaking the stiffness of sleep from my fingers. They are not just fingers, after all, but the tools of my craft. 10 delicate instruments meant to guide ink into words, and words into beauty. Have you ever noticed how hands look different in the morning light? As though the veins rest a little bluer, the nails softer, the skin still holding the warmth of dreams? It is with these hands that my day must begin. The first task is simple but sacred, grinding the ink. You might think of it like making coffee, but instead of roasted beans, it is a black, resinous stick that meets the stone. With each circular motion, the A stone grows darker, more alive, until the water turns to liquid night. The sound is hypnotic, a low, sandy hum, like the faint crackle of embers in a dying fire. I sometimes wonder if the act of grinding ink was designed to calm the calligrapher before the day's duties. Imagine starting each morning not by rushing, but by drawing patient circles, slowly coaxing pigment into readiness. The ink is ready. The brush, trimmed, washed, and shaped to a fine point, rests nearby. And the paper? The paper is never mere paper. For the Mughal court, sheets arrive from Samarkand, shimmering with faint specks of gold dust pressed into their fibers. Some are burnished so smooth that they gleam like ivory. Others hold the faint texture of silk beneath one's fingertips. Running a hand across them is like petting a cat that always lies perfectly still. Outside, the palace stirs. Servants sweep courtyards, birds chatter in fig trees, and the faint aroma of cardamom drifts from kitchens where tea is being prepared. I sit cross-legged in my chamber, preparing for the emperor's commission. Akbar himself once said that the written word was the truest art of the empire, for it carried not just beauty, but knowledge. And knowledge, unlike marble domes or jeweled thrones, could not crumble or be stolen. Do you feel the weight of that responsibility? To know that each curve of your pen might become a vessel of permanence? The first line of the day is always the most daunting, like the first bite into a new food or the first step into a cold river. Too slow, and the ink will clot. Too quick, and the stroke will wobble. But then it comes, a smooth curve, black as a raven's wing, drying into permanence on the golden page. Relief flows through me, as though I've cracked open the morning itself. And so the day unfolds, stroke by stroke, in the quiet company of ink, paper, and the rising Sioux. The morning has a way of lengthening itself when you're a scribe. Minutes slip into one another like beads strung on silk. Each breath carries the scent of ink and paper, and the sound. Oh, the sound is not silence, though you might think so from afar. It's the subtle rasp of brush against fiber, like the hush of a moth's wings. It's the faint drip of water cooling in a clay pot by the window. It's the quiet creak of the wooden stool beneath me, reminding me that even furniture shares in the day's labor. As the sunlight grows stronger, spilling over the white marble of the palace, I find myself leaning into the rhythm. Have you ever fallen into a rhythm so deeply that you forget time exists? It's a trance. One stroke curves into another. Letters begin to dance across the page. They are not merely words. They are shapes, echoes, a choreography performed by ink. The language is Persian today, elegant and fluid, every curve like a vine winding across a garden trellis. Tomorrow it may be Arabic or Sanskrit or even a local tongue. A Mughal calligrapher must be fluent not just in words but in worlds. When my wrist grows stiff, I pause to flex it gently. Fingers trace small circles in the air, loosening tendons, coaxing blood back into warmth. Even that motion feels ritualistic, as though part of the calligraphy itself. Outside, the gardens begin to murmur with life. The gardeners call to one another softly. The splash of water pours from bronze cans onto thirsty tulips and marigolds. And somewhere, faint but insistent, a koel sings its repeating call, a melody so simple, yet it carries the entire mood of summer mornings. Breakfast arrives. A young servant pads in quietly, balancing a brass tray, flatbreads still warm from the griddle, their edges browned and crisp. A small bowl of honey, golden as sunlight, trapped in a jar, and a steaming cup of tea, fragrant with card, amam, and cloves. I smile at the thought that my ink and his tea are cousins in ritual, both made by grinding, steeping, and coaxing essence from raw matter. I tear a piece of bread, dip it into honey, and let the sweetness dissolve on my tongue. For a moment, the ink is forgotten, and I am only a man grateful for simple food. Do you ever notice how food tastes different in the morning? Even plain bread feels miraculous when paired with the freshness of dawn. Perhaps that's why emperors and calligraphers alike start their day with ritual meals, to remind themselves of life's simplest joys before the weight of duty presses in. Soon enough, duty does call. A messenger arrives, his footsteps echoing briskly in the corridor. He bows, then places a scroll beside me. The seal bears the emblem of the court. My task is clear. Today I must copy a verse of the Quran onto gilded pages for a manuscript destined for the royal library. The Quran, with its sacred symmetry, demands precision beyond measure. A slip of the hand, a blot of ink, and not only beauty, but sanctity is broken. My breath slows as I consider it. Have you ever felt that tiny flutter of nerves before doing something important, even when you've done it countless times before? That is how I feel now, brush poised, ink gleaming like a pool of night at my side. And so, with the Yamuna glinting outside my window and the hum of the palace beginning to rise, I set the brush to the page once more. The page before me is a sea of golden light, and my brush floats upon it as though it were a small reed boat. Each letter rises like a ripple, swelling outward with grace. The Arabic script is elegant in its restraint, each curve disciplined, each line carrying weight not just of language but of centuries. My hand trembles, not out of weakness, but out of reverence. Imagine being asked to embroider the stars themselves. How careful your stitches would be, how steady your breath. That is what it feels like to copy sacred verses for the emperor's library. The palace is awakening in layers, like a sitar tuning itself string by string. First, the muffled clatter of pots from kitchens, then the giggles of young attendants fetching water, then the distant thud of hooves as horses are led to drink. Courtyards echo with these sounds, each one a note in the morning symphony. Sometimes I catch myself listening more than writing, letting the soft rhythm of life outside seep into my brushstrokes. Isn't it curious how sound shapes our movements? How a bird's call can guide the tempo of a line, or how the clink of bronze vessels can remind the hand to stay deliberate. I pause again, lifting the brush carefully from the page. The ink shines for a moment before drying matte. My eyes wander to the small clay pot of fresh roses set by the window. Their petals lean outward lazily, crimson against the pale plaster wall. I often wonder if the emperor knows that his library is not built by decree alone, but by small gestures like this. A servant leaving flowers in a scribe's chamber, a cook ensuring the tea is strong enough to hold focus, a gardener keeping the air fragrant. History is never just rulers and battles, it is also roses wilting in the heat of June. By mid-morning, the light grows harsher, casting sharp shadows on the marble floors. I shift my cushion slightly, finding comfort, it again in the cross-legged pose. My knees protest, of course, but then so do most things that must bear the weight of patience. Calligraphy, after all, is not a young man's sprint. It is the slow, steady walk of a pilgrim. The body aches, but the soul hums. When the verse is complete, I sit back and exhale. There it is, a single passage, yet heavy with meaning, flowing across the page like water over stone. I know the emperor will see only the finished elegance, but I know too the hidden story, the grind of ink, the warmth of honeyed bread, the call of a coal, the tremor in my wrist. Do you ever think about how much unseen life lives inside of every beautiful thing? The manuscript is set aside to dry, its gold leaf margins catching the sun in tiny flashes. I close my eyes for a moment, letting the fatigue in my fingers settle into something softer. My mind drifts to the Yamuna again, how its waters carry not only boats but stories, how its flow has watched emperors come and go, and how it will keep flowing long after I set down my final brush. And so the morning lengthens, quiet and steady, carrying me deeper into the day's labor, one stroke at a time. The sun now rests higher, turning the marble walls of the palace into sheets of light. Even the shadows seem sharp enough to slice. I take a sip of water cooled in a clay pot, its surface beaded with moisture. It tastes faintly of earth, as if the river itself has left a trace in it. The coolness spreads down my throat, easing the dryness that hours of quiet breathing and concentration always bring. A small detail, perhaps, but in these details, life becomes bearable. Ink for the soul, water for the body, and a steady hand for both. I glance at the completed folio lying flat beside me. Its verses gleam faintly where the sunlight touches the gold margins. To most, this is a work of devotion, and yes, it is that. But to me, it is also conversation. My ink speaking with the words of centuries, my brush answering voices older and wiser than mine. Do you ever imagine yourself as a guest in a conversation across time? That is what a calligrapher does. Whispers with ancestors, one letter at a time. A pigeon lands heavily on the ledge outside my chamber, cooing with the sort of seriousness only pigeons can muster. Its head bobs, its feathers puff in pride. I smile to myself, because in its way it is also a calligrapher, repeating the same curved line of sound over and over until it forms a pattern. Perhaps one day, some historian of pigeons will write about the finest strokes of cooing in the year 1605. Until then, it is just me and the bird, two scribes at work. Soon, a fellow scribe enters, carrying a small stack of papers that need ruling. He bows slightly, and I nod, both of us too absorbed in our tasks to break the fragile silence with words. He sets about stretching a cord dipped in soot across the sheets, snapping it down to leave faint black lines, guides for the writing to come. The sound, a sharp little twang, breaks the morning hum like a plucked string of a tanpura, and then silence again. We are two instruments in the same orchestra, each playing a part that must remain steady, precise, invisible. There is a curious kind of humor in this life. From the outside, one might think it dull, endless hours of letters and ink, with no drama or spectacle. But from within, it is a world alive with quiet triumphs. A perfectly shaped curve is a victory. A page free of smudges is a festival. Even a simple drop of ink landing in just the right place can feel like the universe nodding its approval. Do you know that feeling when you butter toast and the knife spreads it evenly without tearing the bread? That tiny satisfaction? Multiply it by 1,000 and you will know the joy of a clean stroke of calligraphy. Time bends strangely in the chamber. I cannot say whether an hour or a lifetime has passed. The inkstone is lighter, its pool of liquid night almost gone. My stomach reminds me with a faint growl that the morning meal is long behind me. Yet I keep going, brushing curve after curve, line after line, until the room itself seems to breathe with the rhythm of the script. When I pause again, I notice the sound of drums faintly from the courtyard. Not war drums, but the ceremonial nakara, announcing the emperor's progress through the palace. Each beat is steady, commanding, like the heartbeat of the empire itself. It reminds me that my little chamber, my quiet brush, my delicate letters are all part of something vast and glittering, stretching from the Himalayas to the Deccan. To be a calligrapher here is to hold, however lightly, the threads of an empire in your hands. And so the morning stretches toward noon, letters piling gently into history, while outside the Yamuna keeps flowing, eternal and patient. By now the chamber has warmed. The sun pours in through the lattice window, scattering small geometric shadows across the floor. They shift with the hours, slowly crawling toward my cushion. Sometimes I pause just to watch them. The patterns remind me of the very letters I write. Shapes born of patience and repetition, appearing simple but crafted from deep precision. Geometry in stone, geometry in ink. The two are cousins, really. Cousins born from the same devotion to balance. The air carries new scents now. From the kitchens drifts the fragrance of cumin and onions sizzling in ghee, the early promise of the midday meal. My stomach rumbles again, a sound. 'Tis so ordinary, it feels almost out of place beside the reverence of sacred verses. Yet there is comfort in the contrast. Even a calligrapher working on the emperor's Quran must pause to eat. Even hands shaping eternity must feed themselves with bread and lentils. History, I often think, is nothing but a string of meals threaded between tasks. The pigeon from earlier has brought company. A second bird settles on the ledge, and they begin their duet of cooing, perfectly in time, like a choir rehearsing scales. I chuckle quietly to myself. If these birds were scribes, the emperor's library would be filled not with verses but with endless loops of the same sound, coo after coo after coo. A strange thought, but oddly soothing, like imagining a shelf full of scrolls that all hum rather than speak. I dip the brush again, swirling the tip lightly to keep it sharp. My hand hovers for a moment before lowering onto the paper. These letters flow differently now, their lines bolder, more confident. Perhaps it is the growing warmth of the day, or perhaps it is the rhythm my muscles have settled into. The beginning of a page is always a little hesitant, like stepping onto an unfamiliar path. But once you've walked a while, the way seems to unfold itself, and the brush no longer feels like mine alone. Have you ever walked by a river and felt that you were moving in its current, even if your feet were on dry ground? That is what it feels like now. The ink flows, the lines form, and I am carried along, less a maker than a witness. Sometimes I think the script writes itself, and I am merely the hand it borrows. A servant enters again, this time carrying a slender copper vessel filled with cool water. He bows and places it beside me, then retreats without a word. I am grateful for the interruption because it pulls me gently back to my body. I realize my back has stiffened, my shoulders rounded forward, my legs tingling faintly from sitting too long. With a slow breath, I set the brush aside and stretch, arms arching overhead until the joints pop softly. The sound is small, but in this hushed chamber it feels loud, like snapping twigs in a quiet forest. Relief floods through me, a reminder that the body too craves care. I sip the water slowly, letting each drop linger. The clay vessel cools the liquid in a way no glass could. There is an earthy sweetness in it, a taste of the soil and river both. The sip is not just refreshment, it is an anchor, I feel myself here, now, in this chamber, in this moment, at the service of ink and empire. Beyond the walls, the Nakara drums beat again, steadier this time, echoing across courtyards. The rhythm marks the passing of hours, just as my pages do. Each stroke is a measure of time, each verse a chapter of the day. I cannot say which will last longer, the sound of drums in memory or the ink pressed into parchment. But for now, both fill the air, woven into the same tapestry of sound and silence. The page before me nears completion. Another verse stretches across it, the curves now flowing with the calm certainty of habit. I finish the final flourish with a slow exhale, lifting the brush as carefully as if I were lifting a child from sleep. There, another page complete, another moment captured in ink. I lay the brush down, flex my fingers, and close my eyes. Outside, the Yamuna gleams in full daylight, carrying its endless current past the palace walls. I wonder, as I often do, if the river notices us at all. We fuss and labor, building libraries and monuments, yet the water flows on, indifferent, eternal. It is humbling, and strangely comforting too. And so the morning slides gently toward noon, the chamber filled with the faint perfume of roses, the hum of pigeons, the echo of drums, and the steady, unbroken presence of ink drying on golden paper. The chamber has grown brighter still, the latticed shadows reaching long fingers across the floor. They crawl closer to the low table where my papi rests, as if they too wish to touch the sacred verses. There's a curious beauty in this dance of light and dark. It reminds me that calligraphy is also born of the two. Black ink against pale paper, silence against sound, pause against motion. Perhaps everything beautiful depends on such opposites. I rise slowly, joints reluctant, and step to the window. The Yamuna spreads wide before me, sunlight flickering on its surface like shards of broken mirrors. Boats drift lazily across it, fishermen casting nets, merchants ferrying bundles, children leaning over the edges to splash water on each other's faces. Their laughter carries faintly upward, softened by distance, as though the air itself has wrapped it in cotton. I close my eyes, listening, and imagine for a moment that I am one of them, free of ink and duty, just floating along the river's current with no task but to drift. But my task is here, with the page. I return to my cushion, brush in hand, and draw the first letter of a new verse. The ink flows obediently, a thin black ribbon unfurling across the shimmering paper. With each stroke, I feel myself slipping back into the rhythm, back into the quiet trance. The outside world fades again. Boats, birds, laughter, all dissolving into the single act of shaping a line. Have you ever tried to focus so intently on something small that everything else vanishes? A puzzle piece, a needle's eye, a word on a page. The mind narrows until the world becomes only that, and time loses its grip. That is how it feels now. My breath, the ink, the paper. Nothing else matters. A soft knock at the door breaks the spell. The attendant enters once more carrying a tray, this time a small bowl of almonds and dried apricots glistening with honey. The sweetness will help steady the hand, he murmurs, before bowing and slipping away. I smile, because he is right. I take an almond between my fingers, its surface sticky, and bite down slowly. The crunch echoes in my own head, startling after so much silence. The honey coats my tongue, warm and golden, and the apricot follows, tart and soft. A perfect contrast, like ink against paper, sweet against sharp. I chew slowly, savoring, then sip water to wash it down. My body hums with gratitude. It is strange, isn't it, how something as small as a dried fruit can feel like a feast when eaten in the midst of silence? The palace kitchens may hold endless dishes, but here, in this chamber, a single apricot feels like treasure. Refreshed, I return to the work. The letters flow again, but this time they seem lighter, almost playful. My brush lingers at the curves, letting them swell more generously before tapering. I imagine the words smiling, if words could smile, pleased to be born into such freedom. The page seems to glow with life, each line shimmering like a string of pearls scattered across silk. Outside, the sounds of the palace grow louder. Courtiers' sandals slap against stone as they hurry to their appointments. Guards bark commands at one another. Even the faint jingle of jewelry carries on the air, a reminder that the women of the harem stir behind their veils. The empire is in motion, wide and humming, and here I am, one small calligrapher, part of its beating heart. I dip the brush once more, then glance at the inkstone. Its pool has grown shallow, the black liquid clinging to its edges. I know what must come, the grinding again, circles upon circles, coaxing darkness from solid stick to fluid grace. I reach for the ink stick, its surface worn smooth by countless mornings. My hand moves in slow arcs, the stone rasping beneath it, the sound low and steady. It is like breathing for the hand. Inhale, exhale, round and round. Each grind feels like a prayer, each circle like a mantra. By the time the pool is full again, my mind is empty of everything except calm. The page calls once more, and I answer. Stroke by stroke, the letters march forward. Noon is near. I can feel it in the heat pressing down from the ceiling, in the slow heaviness of the air, in the way my eyes ache faintly from squinting against brightness. Soon, the midday pause will come, when even scribes must lay down their brushes and rest. But not yet, for now the ink still flows, the words still rise, and I am carried with them, deeper into the current of the day. The ink glides smoother now, as though the brush itself has grown accustomed to the rhythm of the day. Each line comes with less hesitation, less need to steady my breath. My hand has learned its own patience. There is a quiet joy in this moment, when effort begins to dissolve into ease. Like walking a familiar path, you stop watching every step and simply wander, knowing the road will carry you. Yet, the body reminds me that nothing flows without cost. My fingers ache faintly, a soreness that comes not from heavy labor, but from devotion repeated endlessly. I rub them gently against one another, massaging life back into the joints. Even that small act seems intimate, as though I am tending to loyal companions. These fingers that serve me without complaint, these hands that translate thought into beauty. I pause, laying the brush carefully upon its rest, and listen. The palace hum has changed. The sounds are sharper, faster, more insistent. Courtiers raise their voices in debate. Servants scurry more urgently. Somewhere, far down the corridors, a lute strums, tentative at first, then growing more confident, filling the air with soft ripples of sound. It reminds me of the Yamuna's surface when the wind picks up. Restless, glittering, never still. The scent of the kitchens has deepened too. What was once cumin and onion has blossomed into something richer. The warmth of saffron, the smokiness of rosti, nang meats, the sharp sweetness of coriander. The air itself feels heavier, infused with hunger. My stomach tightens again, reminding me that ink alone cannot sustain a man, no matter how sacred the task. I smile at the thought. How many scribes throughout history have paused mid-verse, stomach growling, distracted by the smell of food? Perhaps more than emperors would like to imagine. Beauty may be eternal, but hunger is relentless. The page before me nears completion. Only a few more lines remain. I take up the brush again, steadying it between thumb and finger, and lean close. Each stroke feels heavier now, not with clumsiness, but with finality. To end a page is to close a small world. I breathe slowly, carefully, letting the last flourish taper into silence. Then I lift the brush, exhale, and rest. There it is. Another completed folio, the ink drying in delicate patterns, the margins shimmering where gold leaf catches the light. I set it aside with reverence, sliding it carefully onto a stack. Already the pile of pages seems to breathe with its own quiet life, as though words themselves carry a heartbeat. For a moment, I simply sit, palms open on my knees, eyes half closed. The light presses down from above, heavy and unyielding. The air no longer feels like morning, it feels like noon. The Yamuna glitters outside, too bright to look at directly, the water broken into shards of fire. Birds have grown quieter, taking shelter in shade. Even the pigeons on my ledge have flown off, leaving behind only a few stray feathers that drift lazily on the breeze. I know what comes next. The midday pause. Brushes are set aside, inkstones covered, pages left to dry. The palace itself will hush for a while, the courtiers retreating to shaded rooms, the kitchens falling into brief stillness, the gardens sighing beneath the weight of the sun, and I, too, will rest. I gather my tools carefully, wrapping the brush in cloth, placing the ink stick in its case, covering the water pot with a lid to keep the dust away. These small rituals matter. They are not merely tidying, but honoring the work, the tools, the time given. Imagine leaving a violin unstrung, its bow frayed, after playing a symphony. No, the instrument must be cared for, because it is what carries the song. So too, with ink and brush. When all is set aside, I rise and stretch again. My legs ache from sitting so long, and the rush of blood tingles strangely as I straighten. I step to the window once more, leaning on the cool stone sill. The Yamuna lies before me, endless and unhurried. I breathe deeply, letting the air fill me, and think of how many mornings like this have passed, and how many more may come. And with that thought, I turn from the chamber, stepping into the corridor where the hush of noon awaits. The corridor is cool after the chamber, the stone floor beneath my bare feet carrying the chill of shade. My steps echo faintly, though I walk slowly, as though unwilling to disturb the silence. The palace, so alive with motion just an hour ago, has begun to retreat into itself. Servants move with hushed urgency, carrying trays into shaded alcoves. A few courtiers fan themselves lazily, their voices little more than murmurs. Even the guards stand with softened postures, spears in hand, but eyes half-lidded against the weight of noon. I make my way toward the courtyard. The sun presses down from above, turning every marble tile into a mirror of light. I shine. Held my eyes and cross to the veranda, where the air stirs faintly with the promise of breeze. Beneath the arches, water trickles in carved fountains, the sound cool and soothing. I lower myself onto a cushion there, feeling the stone's lingering chill against my back, and let the world slow. This is the hour when a scribe becomes a man again, not a vessel of ink or keeper of sacred words, but a body that hungers, a mind that drifts. An attendant appears, bowing lightly, and sets down a tray. A small bowl of rice, fragrant with saffron, a ladle of lentils simmered with ginger, and a clay cup of sweet lime sherbet. Simple food, yet in this heat, it feels like luxury. I eat quietly, savoring each bite. The saffron stains the rice a pale gold, like the margins of the pages I had been working on. The lentils are soft and comforting, filling me with warmth. The sherbet is cold, sharp, and sweet, sliding down my throat like a song of relief. My hunger settles, my body softens, and I lean back, eyes drifting half-closed. The courtyard hums gently around me. A pair of sparrows dart between the columns, their wings a quick flutter. Water continues to fall in the fountain, steady and sure, a sound like endless patience. Somewhere beyond, the Yamuna glitters, but here in the shade, time loosens its hold. I think of the pages I left behind, drying in silence. They are waiting, of course, for my return, but for now, they are content to rest as I am. This pause is not idleness. It is part of the work, just as silence is part of music, just as space is part of design. Without pause, words collapse into noise. Without rest, hands falter. And so, beneath the arches, in the hush of midday, I let my breath slow, my eyelids grow heavy. The world fades into soft edges, ink and paper dissolving into dream. For the calligrapher, dawn has ended, noon has come, and as I drift gently between waking and sleep, I know that soon another chapter will unfold, a chapter not of rivers and mornings, but of the very weight and wonder of paper and gold. The palace rests in its noonday hush, the heat pressing down as though the sky itself were heavy with drowsiness. I linger in the shaded veranda, lulled by the trickle of fountains and the distant hum of cicadas. But soon, as always, duty calls me back. The ink will not write itself, and the emperor's library does not fill on sighs and silence alone. I rise, stretching the stiffness from my back, and return to my chamber. The air inside is cooler now, the latticed shadows shorter, denser, as though they too have grown tired beneath the weight of sun. The pages I left earlier lie waiting, their ink dry, their gold margins gleaming faintly in the dim light. I cannot help but pause before them, tracing the letters with my eyes. They seem almost alive, as though the verses themselves breathe quietly on the paper. But today, my task extends beyond ink. It is not enough to write words. They must live within vessels worthy of them. And so I turn my attention to the paper itself, that thin, fragile skin upon which empires pour their knowledge. Have you ever considered how miraculous paper truly is? We treat it as ordinary, as common as air. But in truth, each sheet is a world of labor. Fibers beaten, pulped, pressed, dried, burnished. Dyes crushed from plants, gilding hammered from precious metal, scents of rosewater or sandalwood rubbed gently into its surface to keep insects away. A single page might travel farther than a merchant, from Samarkand to Shiraz, from Lahore to Agra, gathering stories with each hand that touched it, and here it rests before me, silent yet infinite, waiting for ink to reveal its soul. I lift one sheet carefully, pinching it between thumb and forefinger. It glows faintly in the light, thin yet strong, smooth yet warm. Pressing it lightly against my cheek, I feel its coolness, like silk in winter. I lay it upon the desk, smoothing its edges, and to think of the craftsmen who toiled to create it. Men with calloused hands, standing over vats of pulp. Women polishing fibers with smooth stones until their arms ached. Gold beaters hammering thin sheets for days until the metal grew so fragile it trembled in the breeze. None of their names will be recorded in the emperor's registers. Yet without them, the grandeur of the Mughal library would collapse into dust. The thought humbles me. We calligraphers are praised for our steady hands, our graceful strokes. But truly, we are the final link in a long chain, the last brushstroke on a canvas begun by many. Perhaps that is why I treat each sheet with reverence, because I hold not just paper, but the invisible labor of dozens. I prepare the tools for gilding, a small knife, delicate as a whisper, a pad of fine leather, a breath that must be steady, gentle, never hurried. Gold leaf is not like ink. It does not forgive. A single puff of air, and it flees. A trembling hand, and it tears. Imagine trying to carry sunlight on a spider's web. That is what it feels like to work with gold leaf. I lift a square of it now, thinner than the skin of an onion, brighter than fire. It wavers as I move, trembling in invisible breezes. With the knife, I coax it into place along the margin of the page, pressing it gently with a brush of soft hair. It clings, delicate and dazzling. I breathe out slowly, carefully, afraid even my exhale might scatter it. And when I step back, the page has transformed. The letters yet to come will sit upon a throne of light, words framed by eternity. The palace hums again outside. Voices rise, footsteps echo, the afternoon stirrings begin. But here in my chamber, the world has narrowed to paper and gold, ink and breath. The gilded edge settles into place, gleaming softly in the filtered light. I tilt the page slightly, and the gold shifts like water, shimmering. And with each angle, it is not merely decoration. In this court, it is devotion, an offering of wealth and brilliance to words deemed sacred. Some might think it excess, but in truth, the gold is not for the eye alone. It is for the spirit. To surround a verse in gold is to remind the reader that they hold in their hands not just ink and paper, but treasure. I think of the emperor's library, vast and echoing, filled with shelves upon shelves of manuscripts. Each book is a jewel, not in metaphor, but in fact. Leather bindings dyed crimson, emerald, or deep indigo, covers studded with gems, rubies catching candlelight, emeralds glowing like captured spring, and within, these very pages glowing with letters and framed with fire. Imagine walking into such a place at night, lantern in hand, the books glittering like constellations waiting to be read. Who needs the sky when the library holds its own stars? As I press another sheet of gold leaf into place, I remember a tale told among scribes that once, under Emperor Humayun, a manuscript was so encrusted with jewels that it had to be read by moonlight, lest the reflections of lamps blind the eyes. Whether true or not, the story carries its own kind of truth, that beauty can overwhelm as surely as darkness. Too much gold, too many jewels, and words risk drowning beneath their splendor. My task, then, is to balance. Enough radiance to honor, but not enough to obscure. The gold leaf is finished. I set the page aside to rest, the shimmer catching in the corner of my vision. Now I turn to another stack of papers, these still plain, unadorned. Their surface is smooth but dull, lacking the fire of gilding. I run my fingertips across one sheet, feeling its grain, a faint, ridged texture like the grooves of a seashell. To some, imperfections. To me, reminders of its birth. This was once fiber, once plant, once life. The page carries memory, even if it does not speak it aloud. Beside me sits a small jar of burnishing stones, each smooth and polished. I select one, holding it in my palm. Its weight is reassuring, neither too heavy nor too light. With steady pressure, I rub it across the surface of the paper, back and forth, again and again. Slowly, the dullness gives way to shine, as though the sheet itself is awakening. The sound is soft, a faint rasp like distant waves kissing sand. My arm tires, but I continue. Burnishing is not about speed, it is about surrender. The stone teaches the paper patience, and in turn, the paper teaches me. Hours slip by in this way, page after page, burnished, smoothed, prepared. My body aches, but my spirit feels strangely light. There is a meditative rhythm in the work, a mantra without words. Rub, breathe, rub, breathe. By the time I finish, the stack gleams faintly, as though holding its own hidden light. I sit back, exhaling. The chamber smells faintly now of heat and effort, my skin damp with the labor. I wipe my brow with a cloth, then glance at the growing pile of prepared sheets. They are waiting, eager for ink, for verses, for the life I will breathe into them. But for now, they rest, and I rest with them. A knock sounds again. Another attendant enters, bearing not food this time, but pigments, small porcelain dishes, each filled with powder, lapis lazuli ground into a blue so deep it feels like staring into night, vermilion red, bright as flame, malachite green, the color of fresh leaves after rain, and, of course, gold, ground into powder finer than dust, waiting to be mixed with gum and water. These are not for words, but for borders, for flourishes, for the miniature paintings that will cradle the text. Words may carry knowledge, but color carries emotion. Together, they weave completeness. I thank him softly, though my voice sounds strange in the quiet, as though I've forgotten how to use it. He bows and departs, leaving me with the silent company of colors. I lean forward, inhaling their faint mineral scents. The lapis smells cool, like stone dampened by rain. The vermilion has a faint sharpness, almost metallic. The malachite is earthy, grounding. Each one whispers of distant mountains, mines, and rivers. of lives risked to carry pigment across deserts and seas. To hold them here is to hold a map of the world itself. And so, with paper burnished, gold leaf laid, and pigments waiting, I prepare for the next stage. The weight of paper is no longer metaphor, it is literal, stacked before me, gleaming, ready. My brush hand tingles in anticipation. Soon, words will return. But for now, I simply sit with the materials, breathing them in, honoring their presence. I lift one of the tiny porcelain dishes, the one filled with powdered lapis lazuli. It sparkles faintly, as though even crushed to dust, it still remembers the mountain from which it came. Imagine, for a moment, the journey of this blue. Mined from deep caverns in distant Afghanistan, hauled on camelback across arid plains, traded in bustling markets where languages tangle like threads. By the time it reaches my table, it has traveled farther than I ever will, and yet its destiny is here, to illuminate the curve of a border, to cradle a verse in celestial blue. I pour a little into a shallow shell and add a drop of water, then another of gum arabic. With a small brush, I stir slowly, watching as the powder dissolves into a liquid as rich as a summer sky. The transformation feels alchemical, as though I have conjured night and day in the palm of my hand. The scent is faintly earthy, the texture smooth and thick. I test a stroke on a scrap of paper, and it dries into brilliance, a blue so deep that it hums. Beside it waits the vermilion. This red is fiercer, louder, demanding attention even in silence. Ground from cinnabar, it holds a sharpness that almost stings the nose. I mix it carefully, cautious, for too much water will dull its fire. On the page, it blooms like a flame against parchment, a reminder of warmth, of passion, of life itself. The malachite green follows, softer, gentler, whispering of gardens after rain, of leaves trembling with dew. It is cooler to mix, smoother under the brush, spreading in calm strokes that soothe the eyes. And finally, the gold powder, shimmering in its dish. Mixed with a little honey water, it flows into liquid sunlight, a paint that glitters as it dries. To work with it is to play with captured dawn. I line the colors up before me, 4 companions waiting at my side. Their presence fills the chamber with quiet expectation, as though the walls themselves lean closer to watch. I breathe deeply, centering myself. This, too, is part of the scribe's duty, not only to write, but to frame, to embellish, to make words not just visible, but radiant. Taking the brush once more, I begin with the borders. A thin line of blue first, framing the page in cool serenity. My hand is steady, my breath slow, the stroke unbroken. Then a second line of red within it, bright and alive. Between them, I leave space for gold to later shimmer, though for now it remains empty. Finally, small flourishes of green in the corners, tiny leaves curling like vines around the words. Each motion is deliberate, meditative, as though I am weaving a garden around the verses. The work is slow. My back grows stiff, my eyes ache, but the page transforms steadily under my hand. What was once plain parchment now carries life, color, brilliance. It feels less like decoration and more like conversation. The words speak with authority, and the colors reply in reverence. Together, they create balance, sound and echo, voice and harmony. By the time I finish, the light outside has shifted. The harsh blaze of noon has softened, leaning toward afternoon. Shadows stretch longer, and the chamber cools slightly. I sit back, setting the brush aside, and study the page. It glows in the dimness as though it holds its own light, a quiet lantern of knowledge. I imagine the future of this page. Perhaps it will rest in the Emperor's library, opened only on rare nights when scholars gather. Perhaps it will be bound into a volume, its edges brushed with gold, its cover studded with gems. Perhaps it will cross oceans one day, carried by merchants or stolen by conquerors, ending in a foreign land where no one can read the script, but all admire its beauty. Whatever its path, I know that a part of me will travel with it. My breath, my patience, my hours pressed into paper. I close my eyes and let the thought settle. There is humility in this work, and pride too, but neither overwhelms the other. What remains is gratitude. To sit here, with ink and gold, with colors from the ends of the earth, with words older than memory. Is this not a kind of fortune? Outside, the palace hum rises again. Afternoon has begun, and with it new duties, new voices, new pages waiting. I rise, stretching, and prepare to continue, for the weight of paper and gold is not a burden, but a calling. The afternoon brings a new kind of quiet, not the hush of dawn, tender and uncertain, but a deeper stillness, as though the entire palace exhales after the blaze of noon. The marble corridors are cooler now, shaded by high arches, and the breeze from the river finds its way through carved screens. It is in this softened air that the scriptorium awakens. The scriptorium is not a single room, but a series of chambers humming with labor. As I step inside, I hear it at once. The faint scratch of reed pens on paper, the muted thud of burnishing stones, the soft murmur of scribes trading quiet words. Each chamber has its own rhythm, yet together they form a harmony. Imagine walking into a beehive, not of buzzing chaos, but of orderly hum. That is what it feels like here. At one table, young apprentices stretch cords dipped in soot across wide pages, snapping them down to leave faint, guiding lines. Their faces are serious, brows furrowed, tongues peeking out in concentration. Every so often, one makes a mistake, a line crooked, a page smudged, and a soft sigh escapes, the kind of sigh only youth can make, half frustration, half impatience. The older scribes smile knowingly but say nothing. They remember their own crooked lines well enough. At another table, illuminators work with pigments. One stirs vermilion with a brush, another grinds more malachite into powder, the pestle rasping against stone. A third bends low over a page, painting delicate vines that wind around verses, leaves so small you would need a magnifying glass to count them. Their hands are steady, their breath even. You might think them statues if not for the faint twitch of brush tips. In the corner, binders prepare leather covers, sheets of goatskins stretched and scraped, dyed in vats of crimson and indigo. The smell is strong, sharp, earthy, not unpleasant, but grounding, reminding us that even beauty must be built upon labor. They press designs into the leather with heated tools, patterns of stars and flowers that will later cradle the words. I pause, taking it all in. Here is the empire's heart, not in swords or palaces, but in ink and paper, in the quiet toil of men and women who know they will not be remembered by name, yet whose hands shape eternity. Do you ever wonder how much of history rests on those unseen, unrecorded? Kings are remembered, but without the calligrapher, the binder, the illuminator, their decrees would vanish into air. By the time my page is complete, the lamps glow brighter, pushing back the growing dusk. My back aches, my wrist throbs faintly, but satisfaction hums through me. I set the sheet carefully atop the drying stack and flex my fingers. The work is never truly done, but for today, it is enough. A servant enters quietly, carrying a tray of tea. The fragrance of cardamom and rose drifts across the room. Each scribe pauses, setting aside tools, and accepts a small cup. The tea is sweet, warm, soothing, its steam curling upward like prayer. We sip in silence, our eyes tired, our bodies grateful. No grand feast, no loud celebration, just a cup of tea shared in quiet company. Sometimes that is all the soul needs. The senior scribe clears his throat. Tomorrow, he says softly, the emperor will visit. The words ripple through the room, though no one gasps or fidgets. We have known such days before. Still, a subtle tightening of posture, a new steadiness in the eyes. To have the emperor walk among our pages is both honor and test. He will not inspect every stroke, but the knowledge that he might is enough to sharpen us. I nod to myself, sipping the last of the tea. Tomorrow will be weighty, but tonight remains. And tonight, the scriptorium glows in lamplight, pages drying in neat stacks, brushes resting on their stands, pigments shimmering like captured jewels. The weight of paper and gold surrounds me. Heavy, yes, but also comforting. Like a blanket drawn across the body, its warmth both grounding and endless. The last pages of the day rest in careful stacks, their surfaces gleaming faintly with drying ink and gold. I lean back, letting my gaze soften, and it feels almost as though the manuscripts themselves breathe. Each one holds the labor of hours, the patience of many hands, the silent devotion of those who came before, and yet together they seem weightless, as though beauty itself has no heaviness at all. Around me, the scriptorium slows. Brushes are washed and wrapped, inkstones rinsed, pigments covered. Apprentices move quietly, their once clumsy steps now cautious with fatigue. The senior scribe gathers the completed sheets, checking corners and margins with eyes sharp despite the lamp glow. He nods once, satisfied. That nod is our dismissal, our blessing to rest. I rise, stretching stiff muscles, and roll my shoulders until the joints sigh with relief. My hands ache, but they ache sweetly, the ache of labor done, not wasted. The chamber hum fades as one by one scribes depart, carrying with them the day's silence. The illuminators pack their brushes, the binders fold their leather, and soon only the faint crackle of oil lamps remains. I linger a moment longer. The light flickers across the pages, casting tiny shadows of letters onto the desk. For an instant, they look alive, as though the words are walking. I smile at the thought. Perhaps they are, in their own way, walking into the future. Finally, I gather my things, the brush wrapped in cloth, the ink stick placed gently in its case, the burnishing stone, cool and smooth against my palm. Each tool carries its own story, and each deserves rest, as I do. I step into the corridor, and the cooler air greets me like an embrace. The palace is quieter now, its noise settled into evening hum. The Yamuna flows dark in the distance, its surface catching the last streaks of sunset, red and gold fading into deep blue. Courtyards glow with lanterns, their flames flickering like stars fallen to earth. I walk slowly, listening to the sound of my own footsteps against stone. Tomorrow the Emperor will come. Tomorrow our pages will be judged not by fellow scribes, but by eyes that hold empires. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, there is only the river, the gold still gleaming faintly on drying sheets, and the weight of quiet satisfaction. The weight of paper and gold is not only in the hands, it is in the heart. It presses gently, reminding me that I am part of something larger, something lasting. And as I leave the scriptorium, I carry that weight with me into the soft embrace of night. Morning was for ink and gold, for the steady hum of brushes and burnishing stones, but afternoon yields to ceremony, to the slow unfurling grandeur of the Mughal court, and so I find myself walking the long marble corridors toward the Diwan-i-Khas, the hall of private audience. The air cools as I pass beneath high arches, the light softened by latticed screens that scatter it into delicate patterns on the floor. My footsteps echo faintly, yet even my echoes seem to hush themselves here, as though they, too, feel the weight of this place. Ahead, voices murmur, not loud, never loud, but a low tide of whispers that rises and falls, a sea of careful words exchanged in shadows. The hall itself opens like a vision. White marble pillars rise to carved ceilings, their surfaces inlaid with semi-precious stones that shimmer in the lamplight. Jasper, carnelian, onyx, lapis. They gleam like stars scattered across a pale sky. In the center, a throne rests upon a platform, gilded and glittering, draped in silks so rich they ripple like water. To see it is to remember immediately that here sits not only a man, but an empire. I step softly along the edge, clutching the small bundle of manuscript pages I've been asked to bring. My heart beats a little quicker, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of expectation. Imagine carrying a fragile vase across a crowded row. Every step careful, every breath measured. That is how it feels to carry verses for the emperor's eyes. Courtiers cluster in small groups, their robes rustling, their jewels catching the light with every subtle movement. They murmur among themselves about politics, about trade, about matters far larger than ink. Yet their eyes flick now and then toward the throne, watching for the slightest sign, the smallest shift. It is said that a single raised eyebrow from the emperor can end a career. I do not know if that is true, but the way these men lean forward, straining for the smallest hint, makes me believe it. The scent of rosewater lingers in the air, mingling with the faint smoke of sandalwood incense that curls upward in lazy spirals. It is calming, yes, but also intoxicating. Even the air here seems gilded. Every sense sharpened, every sound magnified, every silence heavy with meaning. I keep my head bowed, not from fear, but from humility. A calligrapher does not stride boldly into such a place. We are vessels, not actors. Our duty is not to command attention, but to hold it gently, to let the words speak for themselves. Still, my eyes cannot help but flick upward just briefly to the throne, and there he is. The emperor, clad in robes embroidered with gold thread, a turban adorned with a single jewel that catches the lamplight like fire, his face calm, unreadable, as though carved from stone. Yet his eyes see everything. They sweep across the hall, resting here, lingering there, missing nothing. To be seen by those eyes, even for a breath, is to feel the weight of the empire itself. A courtier steps forward, presenting a petition. His voice trembles faintly, though he speaks carefully, each word polished like a jewel. The emperor listens, silent, his fingers resting lightly on the arm of the throne. When he speaks, it is soft, but the hall stills to hear. His words flow like measured ink, deliberate, graceful, unhurried. I find myself holding my breath, as though the rhythm of his speech commands not only courtiers, but lungs. When he falls silent again, the whispers resume, soft as silk, rippling through the hall. Whispers of approval, whispers of doubt, whispers of ambition. It is here, in this hall, that the empire truly breathes, not in battles or proclamations, but in the quiet currents of conversation, in the careful shaping of words. And I, a calligrapher, stand at the edge, holding pages of ink and gold, waiting for the moment when words written in silence will be offered into the grandeur of power. I wait at the edge of the hall, my bundle of pages pressed lightly against my chest. They feel heavier than they should, not because of ink or gold, but because of what they represent. Knowledge, devotion, beauty, faith. To drop them here would be unthinkable. To present them poorly would be worse. A eunuch glides toward me, silent in his movements, yet commanding in presence. His eyes rest briefly on the manuscripts in my arms, then on my face. He nods once, and I understand. It is time. I follow him across the cool marble floor, each step echoing softly in the vastness of the chamber. Courtiers shift slightly, their whispers dipping as I pass. They will not speak of me tomorrow, perhaps not even tonight, but for this moment, their eyes follow. The throne looms closer. The emperor sits still, regal, a pillar of poise. Around him, trusted ministers lean in, their robes heavy with embroidery, their beards perfumed and neatly combed. They murmur advice in his ear, but he listens sparingly, his gaze calm, detached, fixed beyond them. I bow low as I reach the foot of the dais, my hands extended, the manuscripts resting like an offering. The eunuch steps forward, takes the bundle, and places it gently upon a small stand beside the emperor. For a moment, silence. The air grows thicker, heavier. I can hear the faint trickle of a fountain somewhere far behind me, the distant rustle of courtiers' silks. My breath catches, though I force it steady. The emperor leans forward, his hand adorned with rings catching the lamplight, and opens the first page. His eyes scan slowly, moving with a care that mirrors the brush strokes themselves. He does not hurry, He does not rush. Each curve, each line, each margin of gold is considered. To me, the seconds stretch like hours. At last he closes the folio. His expression does not shift dramatically. No wide smile, no harsh frown, only the faintest lift of his chin, a glimmer in his eye. Then he speaks, softly, so softly, I almost wonder if I've imagined it. Good. The word ripples outward like a stone cast into still water. Courtiers nod subtly, ministers murmur approval, and I feel the breath I've been holding slip free. Good. Not excellent, not divine, but good. And in this hall, in this presence, good is more than enough. The eunuch returns the bundle to me, and I bow again, deeper this time. My knees ache from the angle, but I hold the pose until dismissed. When I rise, the emperor's gaze has already shifted, moving on to the next matter of state. My part is complete, my presence reduced to silence once more, and yet a warmth lingers in my chest. To serve with ink, to be seen even briefly, to hear that single word, it is enough to carry me through many more hours at the desk. I retreat, walking backward at first, then turning, my steps soft but swifter now. The whispers resume behind me, a tide that has already swept me away, but the echo of good remains, steady and sure. As I pass into the corridor once more, the air feels lighter, the shadows softer. My hands still tremble faintly, not from fear, but from release, like a lute string easing after being plucked. I press the manuscripts to my chest again, though now they feel lighter, as though the emperor's word itself has lifted their weight. Outside, the evening has begun to settle. The Yamuna shimmers in shades of rose and violet, the air cool and fragrant with night-blooming jasmine. Servants light torches along the palace walkways, their flames fluttering in the breeze. The Diwani cause fades behind me, its whispers lingering only as memory. Ahead lies night, and with it new labors, new silences, new dreams. The court does not end with the emperor's judgment. It only shifts, as though the hall itself breathes in a new rhythm. Once petitions have been heard, once ministers have murmured their counsel, another kind of gathering emerges, one not of politics alone, but of poetry. A poet steps forward, his robe plain but clean, his turban wound neatly. He bows low, then raises his voice. It is not loud. Here, loudness would be vulgar. Instead, his words flow like honey, sweet and deliberate, carrying across the marble with surprising clarity. He recites in Persian, the language of culture, his verse weaving images of gardens, of love, of the fleeting nature of spring. His voice lilts, rises and falls, the rhythm almost like waves upon the river. The courtiers lean in, some with eyes closed, some nodding softly in time. Even the emperor listens, his face unreadable, but his stillness a kind of approval. Poetry here is not pastime, but power. A well-turned phrase can soften tempers, soothe rivalries, remind men that empires are fleeting while beauty endures. I, too, feel the words settle into me, like ink soaking into parchment. They remind me why I write, not only for record, not only farsats or faith, but for the sheer grace of beauty itself. Another poet follows, his verse sharper, filled with wit. He speaks of falcons and hunting, of the cunning of prey and the patience of the hunter. Courtiers chuckle softly at his clever turns. Even I smile, though I keep my gaze lowered. Poetry in this hall is like calligraphy on a page. Every line carries weight, every flourish conceals a message. One cannot listen only with the ears. One must also listen with the heart. Between recitations, servants drift silently through the hall with trays. Small cups of sherbet, cool and fragrant, are offered to courtiers. Platters of dried fruits glisten in lamplight. Figs, dates, almonds brushed with honey. Their sweetness cuts the heaviness of the air, refreshing tongues for the next verse. I am offered a cup as well, lime sherbet, sharp and soothing, and I sip it gratefully. The coolness spreads across my throat, and for a moment I close my eyes, savoring. Even here, in the grandeur of empire, comfort comes in simple sips. Whispers resume between poets. Some murmur of trade routes, of caravans delayed in the north, others of new appointments, of which family might rise or fall. I do not dwell on these matters. They belong to courtiers, not calligraphers. Still, I listen quietly, because history often enters not with proclamations, but with whispers. And here, in the Diwan-i-Khas, whispers are as sharp as blades. The emperor signals, and the poetry ceases. A musician steps forward, lute in hand, and begins to pluck soft strings. The notes hover in the air like moths circling flame. They echo in the marble, a gentle trembling that seems to seep into my bones. The courtiers fall silent again, lulled by melody. Even the whispers rest, tucked away until tomorrow. I find myself thinking of my own brush as the lute plays, how alike they are. The plucked string, the drawn line. Both fragile, both fleeting, yet both capable of carrying beauty across time. When the music ends, it vanishes into silence, yet lingers in memory. When ink dries, it holds shape, yet its true power is also in memory. Perhaps all art, whether string or stroke, is but an attempt to stretch the fleeting moment a little longer. The court begins to dissolve. Courtiers bowing out, servants dimming lamps. The emperor rises, robes flowing, his presence commanding even in retreat. The Diwan-i-Khas empties slowly, like a tide pulling back into the sea. And soon, the hall is quiet again. Whispers replaced by echoes, gold by shadow, murmurs by silence. I step into the night air, the Yamuna flowing dark and serene in the distance. The stars scatter overhead, brighter now that the lamps behind me have dimmed. My body is weary, but my spirit hums, filled with poetry, with whispers, with the weight and wonder of having stood in that hall. And so, beneath the stars, I return to my chamber, ready to let the day slip into memory. For tomorrow will bring new duties, new pages, new whispers. But tonight, I rest, carried by the stillness of the river and the softness of dreams. The morning belongs to ink and paper, the afternoon to court and whispers. But the heart of the day, the still center where labor and duty pause, belongs to the feast. For even in the grandeur of empire, the stomach commands its own reverence. The palace kitchens stir long before dawn. Their smoke rises in thin ribbons above the marble domes, carrying the scent of roasting grains, simmering broths, spices ground into dust. By the time I step into the courtyard at midday, the air is already heavy with fragrance. Saffron, cardamom, cloves, cinnamon. A symphony of scents that greet not the nose alone, but the soul, tugging softly at memory, at hunger, at comfort. We gather in long rows, scribes, courtiers, guards alike, each given a place. Brass trays are laid before us, gleaming in the sunlight, their surfaces warm to the touch. Upon them, servants place small bowls, each one holding a world of flavor. Dal thick and golden, flecked with cumin seeds that still crackle faintly. Rice fragrant with saffron, each grain long and delicate, shimmering with a golden hue. Flatbreads fresh from the tandoor, their surfaces blistered, their edges smoky, soft enough to fold around anything. I tear a piece of bread, steam rising as I do, and dip it into the dal. The texture is smooth, the flavor earthy, yet bright, as though the warmth of the sun itself had melted into the lentils. I chew slowly, savoring. There is something profoundly grounding in this. After hours of ink and gold, to hold something so simple, so nourishing in my hands. Beside me, another bowl awaits. Lamb stewed until tender, the meat falling apart at the touch of fingers, its sauce rich with ginger, garlic, and a whisper of pepper. I spoon it over the rice, watching the sauce seep between saffron threads, and take a bite. The spice is gentle, not sharp, warming the tongue slowly, blooming in the chest like a small fire on a winter's night. Servants pass again, this time with trays of pickles, bright, tangy, sharp with vinegar and chili, mango, lime, even carrot, each piece bursting with flavor. A single bite of pickle can wake the palate, like a shout breaking through a lull. It is contrast that makes the meal. Soft dal beside sharp pickle, warm bread beside cool yogurt, spice tempered by sweetness. Ah yes, the yogurt. A bowl of dahi sits before me, white and cool, its surface smooth as fresh parchment. I stir it gently, then taste. It soothes at once, softening the spices, calming the heat. It reminds me of ink in its way, blank and pure, yet capable of balancing all that surrounds it. Without yogurt, the meal might overwhelm. Without blank space, the page might choke. Balance, always balance. Fruits arrive next, their colors bright as pigments on a painter's pail. Pomegranates, their seeds like tiny jewels bursting with sweetness. Melons sliced into pale green crescents, cool and tender. Grapes so dark they seem almost black, yet their taste is light, refreshing. Eating them feels like tasting summer distilled into drops. And finally, sweets. Small, round gulab jamun, fried until golden and soaked in rose-scented syrup. Their sweetness so rich it lingers on the tongue like a secret. Rice pudding perfumed with cardamom and scattered with pistachios, its texture creamy, its flavor a whisper of comfort. I take a spoonful, close my eyes, and let it melt slowly, as though even my senses want to savor, not hurry. Around me the courtyard hums with the low murmur of satisfied voices, the clink of spoons, the tearing of bread, the laughter of guards, the sighs of scribes. Food has a way of leveling us, reminding each man, emperor, poet, calligrapher, that hunger is the same for all, and so is the joy of having it answered. When the trays are finally cleared, my body feels heavy, but not with burden. Heavy with comfort, with warmth, with the fullness of midday. I lean back, letting the sun wash over me, and feel a drowsy peace settle in. The feast, like a good verse, is not only nourishment but pause, a moment that reminds us we are human before we are anything else. As the last bowls are lifted away and the courtyard clears, the warmth of food lingers within me like an ember. The palace hum softens into its afternoon rhythm. Distant calls of guards changing their watch, the faint clatter of trays being washed, the ever-present rustle of leaves stirred by the Yamuna's breeze. I rise slowly, contentment anchoring my limbs, and return toward my chamber. The feast has done what it always does. Nourished the body, steadied the spirit, reminded me that even amidst empire and ink, there is sweetness to be savored. And with that sweetness, Rati, esting quietly inside me, I prepare to return once more to silence, to paper, to the gentle company of letters. There is a garden within the palace walls where I often retreat after the noon meal. Not the grand gardens, where fountains leap into the air and nobles stroll beneath flowering arches. No, this garden is quieter, tucked into a corner few visit. Its pathways are narrow, shaded by neem and tamarind trees, its benches plain stone worn smooth by time. I call it, in my heart, the Garden of Ink. For here the world itself feels like a manuscript. The grass grows in neat lines, the trees stand like pillars of script, the sky above stretches wide as parchment. Birds trace their arcs like flourishes of a calligrapher's hand, and the breeze turns pages of branches with gentle rustle. To walk here is to walk inside a living book. I settle onto a bench with my tools, a fresh sheet of burnished paper before me. The silence is not total. Birds call, leaves stir, the distant murmur of the river seeps through. But it is a kind of silence nonetheless, a silence that holds sound gently, like ink holding light. My brush rests in my hand, and I breathe. Here, away from the scriptorium's hum and the court's whispers, the act of writing feels different. Less duty, more meditation. I dip the brush, touch it to the page, and let the letters unfurl. They come slower here, more fluid, less bound by perfection. A verse of poetry, perhaps, or a line of wisdom once spoken by a saint. The words are not chosen for commission, not destined for the emperor's eye, but for my own. Private ink, personal script. As I write, I listen to the soft scratch of brush against paper, to the coo of pigeons nesting in the rafters, to the hum of bees drifting lazily among blossoms. Each sound folds itself into the rhythm of strokes. Each breath becomes part of the line. In this way, writing ceases to be work and becomes prayer. The scent of ink mingles with the scent of jasmine that drifts across the garden, sweetness and sharpness together. It reminds me that life, too, is always a balance of contrasts. Without spice, food is dull. Without sweetness, it is harsh. Without silence, sound overwhelms. Without sound, silence oppresses. Balance, always balance. Sometimes I imagine that this garden itself was planted by calligraphers long ago, each tree a letter, each path a verse. Perhaps, centuries from now, another will sit where I sit, feeling the same hush, the same pull of ink across page, and will wonder who came before. In that way, gardens and manuscripts are alike. Both are planted with care, tended with patience, and left as gifts for those who follow. The sun filters through leaves, dappling the page with shifting shadows. My brush slows, then stills. I set it aside and simply watch. The world continues to write itself. Clouds drifting like verses across the sky, branches weaving script against the horizon, ripples on the water spelling patterns no hand could reproduce. Perhaps I think all calligraphy is but an attempt to echo what the world is already writing. The garden invites memory as much as it does silence. Sitting here, brush resting loosely between my fingers, I often think back to my earliest lessons. Before the palace, before the weight of gold and the gaze of emperors, there was only a boy, a reed pen, and a teacher with infinite patience. I can still hear his voice, low and steady, as he guided my clumsy hand. "Do not rush," he would say, his finger tapping the Age. "Ink is not water. It does not flow unless you guide it." I remember how the pen trembled in my grip, how letters sprawled awkwardly, uneven, ashamed of themselves. Yet he never scolded. Instead, he would take my hand in his, steady it, and together we would draw the line again. One curve, one breath, over and over, until the line finally grew smooth, as if the reed itself had learned to breathe. It was he who first told me that calligraphy was not only skill, but state of mind. "Your letters will show your spirit," he said once, while we watched ink dry in the afternoon sun. "If your mind is restless, the line will stumble. If your heart is heavy, the stroke will sag. To write well, you must first become still." At the time, I thought it only a metaphor. Now, as I sit in this garden, I know it was truth. I trace a single word upon the page: saber, patience. The ink gleams wetly, then settles into the fibers of the paper, dark and calm. Patience, yes, not only for ink, but for life. For waiting upon emperors, for gilding pages grain by grain, for listening to whispers in halls where silence weighs heavier than speech. Every stroke is patience turned visible. The breeze stirs again, carrying the faint rustle of leaves. A sparrow hops along the garden wall, cocking its head at me as though curious about what I write. I smile faintly and dip the brush once more. Perhaps I write for the sparrow, perhaps for no one at all. It matters little. Ink is content simply to exist, whether seen or unseen. I recall another lesson from my teacher. The day he showed me how to grind ink. I had thought it dull work, rubbing the stick against the stone until it melted into liquid. But he held my wrist steady, guiding the circle. "This is writing before writing," he whispered. "Do not think of it as labor. Think of it as waking the ink from its sleep." Since then, every time I grind, Ink. I think of it not as creation, but conversation. The ink speaks, the stone listens, and together they prepare to sing upon the page. The garden seems to echo his words. The trees lean like watchful mentors. The earth itself, a patient teacher. Nothing here rushes, yet everything grows. The neem tree does not hurry its leaves. The jasmine does not hasten its blooms, and still they flourish. Perhaps I, too, must learn to grow without haste. I set aside the brush and lean back, closing my eyes. The sun filters through branches, warm against my face. I let my breath slow, each inhale deep, each exhale long, until the body feels weightless. Around me, the garden hums with quiet life. Bees, birds, breeze, a choir of small sounds that lull rather than disturb. For a moment, I imagine the garden itself is writing me. Each breath, a stroke of ink, each heartbeat, a flourish, each thought, a word carried away on the breeze. I am not the scribe, but the page, not the creator, but the creation. And in that surrender, a deeper peace settles in, heavier than sleep, lighter than dream. Time stretches strangely in the garden. Minutes seem to flow like honey, slow, golden, unbroken. I do not know how long I sit, brush idle, gaze drifting between page and sky. The sun has shifted, though, shadows lengthening across the grass, birds changing their chorus to softer notes. The garden itself seems to breathe with me, slower, steadier, as though reminding me that there is no need to rush. My thoughts wander to the inks themselves. Black ink, the humble foundation, made from soot and gum. Gold ink, shimmering like trapped dawn. Indigo, green, red, each with its own mood, its own voice. I remember how once, in my earliest days at the palace, I spilled a small pot of indigo. The blue spread across the desk in sudden rivers, staining my hands, seeping into sleeves. I thought myself ruined, my position lost, but my teacher only laughed, a rare and surprising sound. "Now you carry the sky upon your skin," he said. For days, my fingers shone blue, as though the heavens themselves had marked me. Even mistakes, he taught, can become part of beauty. A smudge can be turned into a flourish, a crooked line into a pattern. There is no perfection in ink, he reminded us. There is only patience. I carry that thought with me still, especially in moments when my hand falters or my mind tires. Perhaps even life itself is no different. Smudges and mistakes folding quietly into design, visible only when we step back far enough to see the whole page. The garden seems to nod in agreement. A fallen petal lies upon my paper, soft pink against white. I do not brush it away. Instead, I let it sit there, as though it too has become part of the verse. Ink and flower side by side, both fleeting, both beautiful. The scent of earth grows richer as the afternoon deepens. Somewhere, water trickles. A small fountain hidden by foliage, its sound steady and soothing. I imagine it as ink flowing forever, writing endless lines across stone, never pausing, never tiring. What might such a fountain write if it could? Perhaps the same words over and over, carved into time itself. Rest, rest, rest. I dip my brush once more and write a single letter, then pause, watching the ink spread, feather slightly at the edges. It looks alive, as though it breathes. I lean close, studying it, and realize that in its tiny imperfections, it is perfect. No two letters are ever truly alike, just as no two breaths, no two heartbeats, no two moments are ever the same. Each stroke is a life complete unto itself. My teacher once said that calligraphy is a mirror. It shows you yourself, he told me, whether you wish to see or not. At the time, I thought he meant only technique, that a steady line showed steady mind, a shaky hand showed unrest. But now, sitting in this garden, I understand more. Writing is not only expression but reflection. Every letter I form is not only for the page, but for me. Each curve says, here I was, in this moment, with this breath, with this heart. The shadows lengthen further. The sparrow has flown. The bees grow drowsy in their hum. I set the brush aside and simply rest, hands folded, eyes half closed. The garden no longer feels like backdrop, but like companion. Its silence is not emptiness, but presence, deep and watchful. And in its company, I feel less like a scribe and more like a page upon which the day itself is writing. The shadows grow longer, stretching like lines of script written by the sun itself. The garden begins to hush in a different way now. Not the busy silence of midday reflection, but the softened stillness that comes when evening prepares to take its seat. Birds fold their wings, bees settle into blossoms, and the breeze cools as though even the air longs for rest. I gather my tools slowly, carefully. The page I leave unfinished, not out of neglect, but out of trust. Tomorrow will find it waiting, and tomorrow I will bring new patience to it. Not every line must be completed in a single sitting. Sometimes beauty lies in pause. My teacher used to say, "Let the ink dream on the page," and I think I finally understand. Even silence is part of the script. As I step from the garden, the scent of jasmine follows me, clinging to my sleeves. The path is dim now, lit faintly by the glow of lamps carried out by servants. Their flames sway gently in the evening breeze, painting the marble walls with trembling gold. I walk slowly. Sevi. Outside, the Yamuna whispers, its waters reflecting the moon. The sound drifts faintly through my lattice window, mingling with the brush's strokes. A lullaby of ink and river, page and night. I feel my body grow heavy, not with weariness alone, but with peace. Here, at the end of the day, the letters begin to blur slightly as my eyes soften. Ink glimmers wetly, then dries, settling into permanence even as my breath slows. I realize with a small smile that these strokes may never be read by anyone, and yet they matter, for they are mine. Born in stillness, shaped in silence. The lamp flickers once, twice, and steadies again. I close my eyes for a moment, listening to its faint crackle. The room, the garden, the hall, the empire itself, all seem to dissolve into quiet. Only ink remains, only breath, only the slow unfurling of dream. The brush glides again, softer now, as though even it has grown drowsy. The strokes are unhurried, floating across the page like boats drifting on still water. Each letter feels less like an effort and more like a sigh. The lamplight embraces them, golden and forgiving, before they settle into the fibers of the page, dark and calm. The night air carries scents through the open lattice, jasmine, damp earth, the faint smoke of distant hearths. The palace itself seems to exhale, its vast corridors emptied, its stones cooled, its gardens resting. Even the river slows, or so it seems, its surface catching the moon in gentle fragments. I pause to dip the brush again, but my hand lingers above the page. Heavy, yet content, I find myself tracing patterns not meant as letters. Loops, curls, flourishes without words. They mean nothing, yet they soothe, like doodles whispered to the night. Sometimes, silence writes better than speech. The lamp crackles softly, its oil settling. Shadows dance along the walls, rising and falling in rhythm with the flame. I imagine them as ancient scribes, their figures bending over phantom desks, continuing their work long after mine has ceased. Perhaps they are the echoes of those who came before me, their spirits still bound to ink, unwilling to let the page go blank. If so, I do not mind their company. Their presence comforts, like elders watching kindly from the doorway. Sleep tugs gently at me, a patient teacher waiting for me to set the brush down. My head dips, my eyes blur, yet I linger, unwilling to part from the page, unwilling to let the night close fully. For there is a sweetness in this liminal space, where ink is still wet, where breath is slow, where the world has quieted to the hum of a single flame. I write a final word, though I hardly know which one it is. The letters blur before I can read them, dissolving into shapes. Perhaps it is dream, perhaps rest, or perhaps it is nothing at all, only ink that wanted to exist. I let it be, The brush rests in its stand. The ink darkens in the stone. The page lies before me, half filled, half waiting, like a promise. Tomorrow it will call again. But tonight it is enough. Tonight, the garden, the court, the feast, the whispers, all of them dissolve into lamplight and quiet breath. I lower myself to the mat beside the desk, the lamp still burning low. Its light flickers across the ceiling, soft and uneven, like the final lines of a story that knows it does not need to end. My body relaxes into its weight. My eyelids fall, and the brush, the page, the empire itself drift into dream. The flame bends once more, then steadies. The ink dries into permanence, though my eyes blur before I can trace the strokes. The night has claimed the palace, halls hushed, courtyards still, gardens folded into shadow. The river whispers on, carrying secrets into the dark. I exhale, slow, long, and let the silence gather me in. The lamp glow, a guardian at my side, its light trembling like a heartbeat. My body softens, my mind drifts. The day, with its gold and whispers, its feasts and gardens, becomes a memory already fading. What remains is only breath, only rest, only the slow unwinding of ink into dream. And so, beneath the lamplight, I surrender. The brush sleeps, the page sleeps, and I, too, close my eyes. The empire continues beyond me, but for now, there is only stillness, only the soft promise of tomorrow's dawn, waiting patiently behind the night. Good evening, dear friend, or perhaps good night if your eyes have already closed. Thank you for wandering through this gentle day in the life of a calligrapher at the Mughal court. May the patience of ink, the hush of gardens, and the whispers of lamplight guide you now into peaceful dreams. If this quiet journey has helped you rest, you may tap like or subscribe, but only if it feels right, only if it brings you ease. And now, may sleep carry you softly, as words carried across parchment, as rivers carry stars across their waters. Sweet dreams. Until next time, good night.